Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's lesson on phonic devices. We're going to be talking about alliteration, assonance, consonants, and rhyme and their use in your poems. So, there's a couple vocab words that you should know by the end of this lesson. You may know them already. So, hopefully, you already know what rhyme is. But we're going to be going over phonics, rhyme, I rhyme, line rhyme, slant rhyme, I rhyme, phonemes, alliteration, assonance, consonants, onomatopoeia, and phonic intensives. And so these are all things that really help you change the sound of your poetry to really improve your message. Because remember, poetry is all about getting that message across that you really want to communicate. And so we have to start off this question of, well, what is phonics? What is this word? What does it have to do? And so we have the root of phon, meaning sound or voice. You'll see this when you see things like telephone, microphone, symphony, megaphone. All these have to do with sound or voices. And then the suffix ik, which just means like. And so it's sound like. It's pretty much anything that has to do with sound. And so it typically just means relating to sound. And so one of the first phonic intensive that I want to talk about is what's called end rhyme. And so this is when the lines of your poem have rhymes, right? And so it shows up at the end of a line of poetry and it rhymes with the previous end of a line of poetry. And so this is seen in William Blake's poem, Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright in the Forest of the Night. This is pretty much the most common form of poetic rhyme you'll see. This is one of the ones that creates that solid beat or meter in the poem, and it's just the most famous way that poets use rhyme in poetry. We also have something called internal rhyme. And this is when there are similar sounds in a single line of poetry. And so, once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, is a line from Edgar Allan Poe. Now, you could just argue that if you separated those into separate lines, then it'd be end rhyme, and you're absolutely right. Your reader, or a lot of times your listener, is going to have no idea whether or not your rhyme is end rhyme or internal rhyme, but there are different names for what happens there. If it's inside of a line, it's considered internal rhyme. If it's at the end of a line, it's considered end rhyme. That's the only difference. And so you might need to know these terms, but it'll sound the same to somebody listening to your poetry. Now, occasionally, and we'll go into this a little bit more, you're going to use something called slant rhyme or half rhyme. And if you listen to a lot of rap, you'll notice that slant rhyme is actually very common. The rhyming words sound similar, but they're not a perfect rhyme. They're not a complete rhyme, right? And so if we see it like in this George Wolfe poem where he says, if love is like a bridge or maybe like a grudge, right? Now, bridge and grudge are not perfect rhymes. They have that j sound at the end, but they don't share the same vowel sound or anything like that. Bridge would be a perfect rhyme with ridge or fridge, right? Grudge would be a perfect rhyme with fudge. But bridge and grudge have a similar sound, but they're not perfect rhyme. And this is what's called slant rhyme because it's not exact, but it's close enough. And if you were to hear it, especially in a song, you wouldn't really call it into question. And so it really works in a lot of positions. And then the last one, and this is going to start me off on a whole tangent, is something called I rhyme, which this should not exist. But in English, because English is English, sometimes we have words that look like they should rhyme when they're written on paper, but they don't, right? And so we have the word rough. Rough looks like it should rhyme with the word through, but it doesn't. Rough and through do not rhyme, although it looks like rough and through, right? But they're not rhyming words. They just look like they should rhyme on a piece of paper. Another example is love and cove. These words look like they should rhyme, but they don't rhyme with each other because English. And this is going into my next topic. It's very important when you are considering the sound of your poem that you not use your eyes. You got to use your ears because let me show you how the alphabet lies to you. The alphabet is one of the greatest liars in the world, right? And this is the reason why English is one of the few languages that have spelling bees, right? Spelling bees are an English invention. Other languages don't have spelling bees because to have a spelling bee in their language would be pointless because if you can see the word or you can hear the word, you know how to spell it. right? And in English, this is why it takes kids longer to learn how to read in English. There's all kinds of problems that go along with our language because our alphabet really doesn't tell you how to pronounce words, and oftentimes is straight up unhelpful when it comes to figuring out sounds, right? So I have some examples here. So if we were to say the great general, right? Now, here both the letters are G, right? And great makes the G sound, but general makes the J sound, right? There's no reason why general should be spelled with a G instead of a J, because J is the J sound, right? G is the G sound, right? And so here, if you were to think that you're doing alliteration, which I'll talk about in a minute, you're not, because the sounds are actually different, right? Here's one of my most egregious examples where we have the word laughter. And if you add an S to the beginning of the word laughter, it doesn't make slaughter, it makes slaughter, right? And so all of the letters have different sounds other than what they are represented to be, right? And so here I have, this looks like the dove dove, but this is the dove dove, right? And there's really no reason or no way to tell which sound is being produced by the word except for the context in the sentence, right? Even something like the TH sound, which we consider to be fairly regular, is not that regular. They and theater are two different sounds. One is the, and the other one is th, right? And so those are slightly different sounds. Now, the other problem is sometimes similar looking things make different sounds. Sometimes different looking things make the same sound, right? Here we have not, bought, taught, and wat. They all make the ot sound. But they're spelled 4 different ways. Even the humble S at the end of a word can change. Wows and windows. This is making wows here, the S is making an S sound. Here, the S is making a Z sound. Typically, very often, 50% of the time, if you have an S at the end of the word, it's making a Z sound instead of an S sound. You'll see this sometimes in like advertisements for companies, where they'll put a Z at the end of the word if they're being zany, but they're actually spelling their business much more accurately than they would be if they spelled it with an S. Here we have create and serial. Once again, C is one of those letters where sometimes it's a C, sometimes a K sound, sometimes it's an S sound. And here, once again, we have an example of the same sound being made 5 different ways. Herd, bird, word, nerd, and absurd. They're all making the erd sound, but here we have every single vowel being used. We have 5 vowels, and each of the 5 vowels makes the same sound. It's madness. It really is. And so the whole point here is that you can't trust your ears. You can't trust your eyes. You have to trust your ears. And so really the problem is this. The English language makes 44 individual sounds. These are what are called phonemes. And so all the little individual sounds that we make in English, like that are supposed to be represented by letters or not, these are called phonemes. And we have 44 of them. But we only have 26 letters, right? We have way more sounds than we have letters for. And so that's one of the first problems we have. And then some of the letters we have, such as C, Q, and X, are really unnecessary. We do not need these letters. C could be replaced with K and S. Q, it could be replaced with a K and a W. And then X is typically could be replaced with like a K or KS, right? And so this means that we have 23 letters actually in the alphabet that are being used to represent 44 sounds. And so we pretty much have half as many letters as phonemes. And so that means every letter we have has to make 2 additional sounds. And then if you take into this that the English is made up of, our language English has a lot of German, has a lot of French, has a lot of Latin, and each of those things have different spellings in them, and those are all put into the way we spell things. It's a lot of confusion, and a great deal of what we consider to be reading is just memorization, right? And like I put at the bottom, spelling bees are an English invention. Other languages would find them pointless. If you can hear the word, you can spell the word. English is one of the few languages where you hear the word and you can't really guarantee that you know how to spell the word. And, people have tried to fix this. This is the phonetic alphabet for English, and this has enough letters to make up all the sounds. And you can see here, one of the things that we have, in the biggest place you're going to have the problem with the English alphabet is in the vowels, right? We have here, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 20 different vowel sounds that we make in English, but we have 5 vowels. And so A, E, I, O, and U. And if we would have to find 4 different ways to use each of those in order to actually represent all the sounds we need. Now, I don't need you to remember the phonetic alphabet. I have looked at this thing many times. I don't have it memorized. I couldn't tell you what each sound makes. But the point I want you to remember is I want you to just stop trusting your eyes. Do not use your eyes to figure out the sound of your poetry. Do not look at a letter and assume that it's making the sound you want it to make. You have to use your ears, right? And when you're looking at your poetry and you want to make a certain sound in your poetry appear, you got to use your ears. If you use your eyes, they will deceive you. And so I want to go into some of the ways that we use sound in English. The first one was rhyme. Now I want to also go into something called alliteration. And this is when you repeat the beginning sounds in words that are close together, right? And so if we said 3 thirsty tigers tried to tie the 2, right? You'll notice that all of those are starting with the T sound. But if those of you who are listening to the previous part might notice that these are not all the same sound. 3 and thirsty make a different sound than tigers tried to tie the tube, right? And so tigers tried to tie the tube all make the strict T sound, right? 3 and thirsty make the th sound, and the makes the th sound, right? And so it looks like they're all the same, but it still makes kind of a musical effect, right? 3 thirsty tigers tried to tie the tube, right? And so you can get away with it, but it's just be aware that just because something looks like it makes the same sound as something else doesn't necessarily mean that it's the same. And learn that alliteration is just the repeated sound at the beginning of words. And so if you want to kind of use that alliteration, oftentimes it can be used to create kind of a good beat or just an interesting sound in your poetry. And so we do this a lot as children. A lot of children's rhymes and tongue twisters are alliteration, right? So Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers, right? You're using that P, P, P sound to help you pronounce your words, right? Or how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood, right? Same thing there. You're using that blah, 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 blah sound over and over again. Or she sells seashells by the seashore. You're mixing up the sh and the sounds in a way that sounds interesting, but also helps you with your pronunciation. And so what I'd recommend right now is I would recommend pausing the video and seeing if you can create 2 unique sentences that use alliteration. Choose a sound that you want to start your sentences with, and then see if you can make 2 sentences of 5 words or more where they all use the same beginning sound. Now you notice I said sound, not letter. Once again, start trying to rely on your ears and not your eyes. Pause the video now to write those sentences. All right, moving on. The next thing I want you to recognize is a phonic pattern called assonance. And this is the repetition of vowel sounds in non-rhyming words. Now, if you don't know the difference between vowels and consonants, I would recommend doing some research on that right now. The vowels are the letters that make the softer sounds in English, like A, E, I, O, and U. And the consonants typically make those harder sounds, right? And so if we have words that don't rhyme, but they each make a sound that's similar, it's considered assonance. And so here we see these keys reach, see these fiends reach keys. I'm stuttering today. They're all making that long E sound, right? See these fiends reach keys. Now, once again, you can't trust your eyes here. If you were to look at these words, you'd be like, oh, those are different sounds, but they are all making the same vowel sound despite how they're spelled. Assonance is going to be one of the ones that's hardest for you to recognize because it is so often that vowels, you make different sounds in English. And so, same thing. See if you can practice this. See if you can create two unique sentences that use assonance in the sentences. Okay, and remember, you got to trust your ears, not your eyes. And finally, we have consonants, and this is the repetition of consonant sounds in non-rhyming words of close proximity. And so we have a Fuji's line where they say, the rap rejects my tape deck, ejects projectile, whether Jew or Gentile, I rank top percentile. And so we have the k sound in there, repeated, right? And, if we were to put it in simpler spelling, it would probably just always be spelled with a K. Rejects my tape deck, rejects projectile. That would be simpler. If we had a language that made more sense and was spelled in line with what was actually being said, it would help a lot. We don't have this because pretty much everybody who knows how to read right now doesn't want to learn how to read again. And also there's a lot of classism in spelling and knowing how to spell. It's been traditionally the way that the educated classes have shown their education is that they remember all of the obscure spellings of words, whereas somebody who writes enough ENUF, they would look at that person and be like, oh, you aren't educated. You don't know how to spell, right? But they do. They spelled it in a way that makes perfect sense. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing, guys. But anyway, remember, my point is ears, not eyes. And so more consonants, right? And so if I were to say something like the track was cratered and cracked, I have the K sound repeated throughout here. Growing up around a rural farm was rough, right? The R sound is repeated. The basketball club embraced the boy is the B sound. Now you'll notice with the consonants, if it was repeated at the beginning of the word, it would be alliteration, right? And so we have a bit of alliteration here at the cratered and cracked, but you'll notice that it's not just in the word. It's not just at the beginning of the word. It's in the middle of the word, right? Also. And so that's what makes it consonants. And so there's a little bit of a helpful way to figure this out. So if you have something it's rhyming, it's not consonant. So if you say I'm old, cold, and bold, I will not fold, that's rhyming. It's not consonants. Also, if it's alliteration, my friend's father left to fester, that's alliteration more so than consonants. And so let's try this, and I'll give you a little thing to help you remember the difference between all of these. Try creating two unique sentences that use consonants. Pause the video if you have to. All right, moving on. And so here's a little chart that's going to help you remember the difference between all of these, hopefully. Let's move my video over to here. Might be better placed. So let's say you have two words that sound similar, right? They have similar sounds somehow. Which phonic device is this? And so the first question you want to ask is, do the words rhyme? If they do, it's rhyme. If you have two words that sound similar, but they don't rhyme, you want to go to the next one and ask yourself, do they begin with the same sound? If the answer is yes, it's alliteration. If the answer is no, move on to the next one. And then ask yourself, do the words repeat a vowel sound? If the answer is yes, then it's assonance. If not, go to the last one and do the words repeat a consonant sound? If so, it's consonants. And if it's not any one of these, then it's probably not one of the phonic devices that I listed, right? And so let's test this. So word, bird, and nerd. Do the words rhyme? Yes, they do. So this is rhyme. Now, helmet, hurry, and helicopter. Do these words rhyme? No. Do they begin with the same sound? Yes, they do. This is alliteration. Now, if we were to say keep, need, and eagle, do they rhyme? No. Do they begin with the same sound? Nope. This one begins with K. This one begins with N. This one begins with the E sound. Do they repeat a vowel sound? Yes, they do. That long E sound is in all three words. And so this is assonance. And so here's the next one. ground, found, and sound. Do these words rhyme? Yes, they do. So this is rhyme. And then finally, we have keep, pepper, and goop. These words don't rhyme. They don't begin with the same sound. They don't have the same vowel sound. Do they repeat a consonant sound? Yes, they do. That P sound is present in all of them. And it's not at the beginning of the sentence. So this is consonants. And so this chart can be a way of helping you keep these things straight because it really does go in order. Rhyme is the top of the list. And if it's rhyme and nothing else. And then alliteration takes over after that. And if it's alliteration and nothing else. And only then, if it's not alliteration or rhyme, does it become assonance or consonants. One other sound effect you should be aware of that you can use in English is what's called onomatopoeia. And these are words that sound or mimic, they mimic the sound that they're describing, right? And so when you say meow, that sounds just like a cat's meow, right? That word is trying to mimic the sound that the cat is making. Achoo, it's mimicking the sound of a sneeze. Ring is mimicking the sound of a ring. And so you see a lot of these. Like you can think of like Batman comics where it's like pow, bam. It's like trying to mimic the sound boom, or trying to mimic the sound that happens in real life. And you can put these into your poem, and they're always another way to play with sound and make the sound interesting. Now, the final thing you should be aware of in English is that some sounds have certain associations with them, right? And these are what are called phonetic intensives. So you can use this, right? And so if you're trying to communicate in your poem that something is hot or bright, you might use an FL word, right? Because it's associated with words like flame, flare, flicker, flash, or fluoresce. And the association with FL is that it's creating some kind of light, right? And it's usually some kind of like flickering light, right? Whereas GL is used to associate with words that create a steady light, like glow, glimmer, glare, glint, glisten, right? And so these phonetic intensives. So if you were to choose a word like glower, right? It's going to be associated with that in our minds because we're so used to hearing words that sound like it that you'll make kind of the association. So a real kind of powerful example is the ST, right? So ST words tend to be related to being like really heavy or sturdy, right? So stone, stuck, staunch, sturdy, stable, strong, stubborn, right? And so if you're trying to describe something that is immovable, you might say it is, I'm trying to think of an ST word that doesn't directly mean that it's stuck somewhere, right? You could describe somebody as being stubborn, right? Stubborn still has the idea that it won't move, right? But hopefully you're seeing what I mean here, that there are certain word sounds that are associated with words in English, right? Like the SL. That's SL words tend to be associated with something being like greasy or watery or slick, right? Somehow it slides, right? So slippery, slick, slide, slime, slop, slobber, slush. And so you can use this to play around where even if the word doesn't mean what you say it means, it's giving that slight little bit of meaning. And this is really the thing about poetry is even like little bits of meaning, like these phonic intensives, you're taking it all. Anything that you could possibly use to make your poem communicate better, you're finding a way of adding it in there. And so sound is one of those ways that you can do this through all of these things that I mentioned before. And sometimes you just want to make a poem that sounds cool, just because it's nice to hear, especially if you're interested in becoming a musician or a rapper, where the sound of your lyrics is going to be adding to the music and creating something that's pleasant for the listener to hear. And so let's go over the essential vocabulary, and hopefully you can answer these questions. You know what these words mean, right? So phonics, what does that mean? Rhyme. Do you remember end rhyme, line rhyme, slant rhyme, and I rhyme? Do you remember what a phoneme is? Do you remember what alliteration is? Can you Can you separate alliteration from assonance and consonants? Do you remember what onomatopoeia is? Can you remember phonic intensives? If you remember what all these things are and you feel ready to use them, you're probably ready to go on to the work. If you've forgotten what some of these things are, you may want to review the video. Let's take a minute here and let's go and take a look at the assignment that I want you to do in relation to this lesson. All right. Hello, everybody. Let's take a look at the assignment you have about mastering alliteration, assonance, consonants, all those phonic devices in your writing. All right. And so, really, you want to make sure you know these concepts and you can produce examples of them because you want to be able to use all of them in your writing, and I will be looking for them. Look for the due date for assignment 4 on Google Classroom. You'll submit this Google Doc or a copy of it to the assignment. And so scrolling down, you're going to see example 1. I want you to write original examples of alliteration, assonance, and consonants. And if you were keeping up with the assignment during the video and you were writing examples of these, you would already have this. Now, I want you to make sure that you underline the letters in your sentence that make it an example of alliteration, assonance, or consonants. So once you write the example, I want to see you actually highlight the letters in it that represent the sounds, right? And if you're doing like assonance, those letters might be different in each one, but I want to see where in the word your sound is being produced and where you think the assonance, alliteration, or consonants are. So this is your first exercise. Just create an example of each to show me that you can. And I will be putting this assignment through a plagiarism detector. So if you're just going to Google example of assonance, consonants, don't bother. You're wasting your time. You're not helping yourself. You're not learning anything. You're just copying somebody else's work. Please produce these on your own. It's the only way to learn the concept. Next, we're going into a poem here from Elizabeth Bishop called Filling Station. Now, Elizabeth Bishop is a poet that plays around with sound a lot. She always uses a great amount of alliteration, assonance, and consonants in her poems, right? And so what I want you to do is I want you to go through and highlight at least 10 examples of alliteration, assonance, or consonants in the poem. And I've already did paragraph 1 or stanza 1 and started stanza 2, right? And so here, this is an example of one example, right? So monkey cut under, It makes that sound, right? On each. And so I highlighted these 3 to show that they're making similar sounds. And so I highlighted them in green because it's assonance, because it's a repeated vowel sound, right? Here I have consonants with little filling station, oil permeated all over black translucency. She's repeating the L sound in there, right? So it's L. And so that would be one example, right? Because all of these things are working with each other. And so if this were my assignment, I would have 1, 2, 3 examples so far. So what I want you to do is I want you to find 10 more examples in the poem. This is you're very able to do this, right? Because there are way more than 10 examples in this poem. I just want to see if you can find them. So where are the examples of alliteration? Where are the examples of consonants? Where are the examples of assonance? And I would say if it happens more than twice, go ahead and count it, right? So you want things that have an example of it happening 3 or more times in order for it to count. And so if you can notice it in other people's poetry, then I'm pretty certain at that point you will be able to do it yourself. Now you have to remember to use your ears. Don't use your eyes. Otherwise, if you were to look at this, you would never think that monkey suit and cuts make the same sound because they're different letters. English lies to you. Just because something is spelled some way doesn't mean that it is pronounced that way, okay? And then the last thing I want you to see is just in your own music that you listen to. I want you to see that they're using this in music as well. So I want you to take the song title and the artist, tell me what they are, then cut 2 stanzas of the song, right? And put them into the box here. And I want you to do just like you did with Elizabeth Bishop's poem, right? I want you to show me all the examples of alliteration, assonance, consonants, and rhyme that you can find. How is this artist that you like playing with sound in their music as well? So this is going to be assignment 4 for the poetry track. So once again, make sure you come up with 2 examples, original examples of alliteration, assonance, and consonants. Highlight, use the highlighting tool. It's up here on Google. You can highlight yellow here and say you want to find some alliteration. This is an alliteration, but there you go. You would select that and just click yellow and it'll be highlighted, right? Let me undo that. And show me that on your document. And then finally, find a song you like and then analyze its use of sound as well. This is assignment number 4. And let me know if you have any questions. Good luck and make sure you bring those questions to class where I can help you.